I want to take a moment today to talk about a conversation I had with a friend last night. Now, this friend was talking to me, and he's like, you're a reasonable person. I know you're not a right-wing gun nut. You're not an extremist. You're not a zealot. He said, you look at both sides of an argument, and you make decisions based on facts. And he said, so why have you drawn the line in the sand about no new gun laws? And I tried to explain it to him in a way that I'm going to try to go over here too and see if I can get it to come across. And I just wanted to do it. I explained it pretty simply. I have just a little list of problems with new gun laws. Now, I'm not saying I'm against all gun laws. I agree with background checks. I agree with things like that. But these feel-good laws that are meant to stop crime and are specifically targeted to stop crime by denying access to items to the minority, to the majority, just so that the minority can't have them, they don't work. They stop law-abiding citizens from having things, but they don't stop, criminals from having things. Let's just look at the history of gun legislation. It does not alter crime. It has very little effect on crime. In fact, most of them, believe the FBI's stance on the previous assault weapons ban was that it had negligible to zero effect on crime. So, why do we keep passing things that don't have any effect? It doesn't really do any good. And there's a reason. It's because instead of dealing with the real problems, people just want to placate themselves with these feel-good laws. Laws that don't really do anything, but it makes them feel like they've done something. So they sit back and they go, oh, well, now that people don't have 30-round magazines, no one's going to be shooting anything up. Well, until they walk in with, 5 or 6, 7-round magazines and kill just as many people, they just have to reload more often, and it only takes a half a second to reload. So they'll find out, oh, well, that didn't work. Now we have to add more layers to the law. Well, then all you end up doing is you're just snowballing these laws that don't do anything, and you end up with more and more laws and less freedom and less liberty to the people who aren't doing anything wrong. You end up punishing the vast majority, the 99.9% of people that own guns that don't do anything wrong. You end up punishing them over the 0.1% of people that do something wrong. So it's not worth it to take all that liberty and freedom from some people to do something that's really not going to stop the crime anyway. And my biggest problem with it is it stops us from doing the things we need to do, because they sit back and they get this false sense of security, this false sense of self-righteous gratification that they've done something when they haven't, and they don't do the things then that they need to do. Let's say you've got an 8-year-old child who every time they go outside they beat the neighbor kids with a baseball bat. Well, you don't solve that problem by removing baseball bats from the neighborhood. You find out, why the hell is my child beating people with a baseball bat when he goes outside? Because if you just dealt with it by taking away the bats, well, then you've got this false sense of security. You think, oh, problem solved, and you don't deal with the real issue. You don't deal with, why is your child beating people with baseball bats? And that's kind of the thing gun laws do to this country. They sit back and they pass these ineffective laws, and like I said, until things go wrong again, and they add more layers to the law, and it goes wrong again. But they sit back and they pass these laws, and then they sit and they go, oh, well, we've done what we can do. We've done what we can do. We've done everything that's possible, and we've stopped this problem. Well, no, you haven't, because instead of doing the things you had to do, you've passed unnecessary legislation. Instead of beefing up security in soft targets, instead of seeing why people in this country that have mental illness don't get the treatment they need, instead of dealing with the fact that a large number of our children are so over-medicated with dangerous medications simply because it lines the pockets of pharmaceutical companies, instead of dealing with those issues, you've said, well, we've passed a gun law, we're done. And that's what really bothers me the most. It's this false sense of security, this, it's almost like they're protecting the profits of places like pharmaceuticals companies and things like that, instead of dealing with the real issues. I mean, there has to be a reason why they keep wanting to do this. I mean, there has to be profit involved somewhere. I mean, that's the only thing I can figure out as to why you would keep ignoring the real problems and passing these nonsense legislative acts. So, in the end, that's my biggest problem. That's why I've said no new gun laws. Enforce the gun laws we have. I agree with a lot of the gun laws we have. Not all of them, but I agree with the most of them, and I agree with the biggest parts of them, like background checks and things like that. So, enforce those laws. Enforce them to the max. But new laws aren't going to change anything. Restricting freedom doesn't change anything. And worst of all, it distracts us from the real problems.